Previously on Chaos Head Noah.
西条さん、目が覚めたんですね。
A gentle smile accompanied her as she said that. I stiffened up, then looked away.
お体の調子はどうですか？
Feeling a lot better than your dead kid. I can tell you that much. Husky-san held out a thermometer to me so naturally I couldn't help but take it.
体温を測ってくださいね。
Sure, after you go jump out that window right over there. As I took the thermometer from her, I gulped. It's the same. The exact thing from before was repeating. It was as if Hazuki had just walked into the hospital room for the first time. I nervously reached for the thermometer in my underarm. I was sure I had put a thermometer in there just a minute ago. And yet, there was nothing there. The thermometer had disappeared. Which meant that what I'd seen earlier really had been a delusion. The tension in my body disappeared, but that didn't mean that my state of mind was any better, nor that I felt anywhere close to relieved. I fell forward. I couldn't move my body. Confused as could be, using all my hands, I pushed myself slightly upward and looked toward my body. Blood was gushing out from my side. Slimy, protruding intestines glistened in the light. Pink flesh clung to exposed white bones. It was a body that had been bored out. One that couldn't be mine.
嘘でしょ。
Unable to believe what I was seeing, I looked up at Kozupi. Staring at me with nothing but raw disdain in her eyes, Kozupi took the D-sword dripping with my blood. And then, almost as if she wanted me to watch, she took her adorable tongue and slowly licked away the crimson. What the hell was this?
先週出た渋谷限定品だ。ただの当たりより価値がある。
Go on. Sana had a smug expression on her face as she explained. Was she just trying to brag?
だから、私の勝ち。
What the hell kind of competition has she even won? Besides, I didn't want anything to do with these winning sticks, especially of how in poor taste they were. I was tempted to snap the stick right in half on the spot, but I swallowed back my anger and returned it to Sana.
それよりお前。
Silence enveloped us. I could hear Rimi's gentle breaths close to my ear. But no matter how long I waited for her to end it with some silly punchline, none ever came in the wafting silence. Was it possible that this wasn't a delusion? The moment I considered that, a wave of anxiety ran through me. In reality, Rimi was hugging me. She was pressing tightly against me. That realization alone nearly destroyed any sense of reason I had. I had a feeling that, in a situation like this, if I pinned Rimi to the bed, she'd let me have my way with her. With a gulp, I... Shut up, Sana!
たく今のが最後のチャンスだったんだぜ。グラジオール復活を阻止するためのな。
I couldn't even scream.
正しかったのは岸本の方だったってわけだ。
As he said that, Misumu-kun got on top of Iyase's splayed-out body. Then, without even a hint of hesitation, he gouged out her eyeballs. And yet, her body didn't move. It didn't even twitch. Misumu-kun turned toward me, and with a cruel smile, he murmured,
その目誰の目？
My trembling had gotten so bad, I dropped the Saratan figure I was holding. The knife was still pressed against my wrist. The knife holding it was shaking like crazy.
ダメだ。できない。できないよ。
Throwing away the knife, I leaned back in my chair and cradled my head in my hands. How pathetic. I didn't even have the courage to kill myself. No reason to live, yet unable to even die. I couldn't even put an end to my life. The life of a monster. I was a worthless piece of shit who was beyond saving. It wasn't that I wanted to live. I was just scared of dying. Of disappearing for good. Even though I was just a fake.
頼むよ。誰かこんな僕を殺してくれ。あ、やっと出てきた。生存確認。
As I opened the door, Nanami smiled and waved at me. I froze in place. She was acting way too normal. She was acting way too energetic. I'd seen it. A white bandage wrapped around her right wrist. So why? I then remembered the phone call I'd gotten a few hours earlier. The pained voice asking me to give her right hand back. And now, the smile she had right now, and the bandage around her right wrist, contradicted each other. Nanami was contradicting herself. Oh, I see. She was also a delusion. She had to be. I never had a little sister named Nanami to begin with. I got it now. It had to be it. And so it continues. Greetings, my name's Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Chaos Head Noah. So, according to this guide that I've been consulting for the past few episodes, it seems as though I've now finished setting up everything I need to see the Crying Sky ending, so we're going to go ahead and see if all my hard work has finally paid off. And I, for one, am quite curious to see how events will play out from this point forward. How much more different they're going to be from the ending we got the first time. Oh, here we go. Something new. Oh, damn it. Can't go dropping things now. Shinsen Station of the Inokashira line was one stop from Shibuya, with it taking only about a minute to arrive there by train. The station itself was situated within an underground tunnel, resulting in only the natural light being in the beams seeping in from the opening at the end of the platform. Due to the earthquake, all the lights had gone out, enveloping the area in a far thicker darkness than usual. Carrying Orihara Kozue's body on her back, Aoisena set foot onto the platform. There had been no need to buy a ticket. Wait a minute. What happened to Orihara? Not a single staff member was present in the vicinity, and none of the ticket machines were in service. Only a glance was necessary to understand how horribly warped the railway tracks had become. It was no wonder that the trains had suspended operation the day before. Kozue's breathing would turn laborious at times, but she was far from conscious. Dried blood was caked on her forehead. During the earthquake, she had been caught in the wake of a collapsing building and had not regained consciousness since. Gigolomaniacs are unable to use their powers to heal wounds. Unless you're talking me. To the brain, pain is an inescapable reminder of reality. Thus, gigolomaniacs cannot form any sort of mutual recognition to the effect of "I'm not wounded" or "the injury didn't happen." Human instinct would never allow it. Moreover, one cannot establish mutual recognition with someone who is unconscious. These reasons rendered Sena unable to assist Kozue. When they at last reached the deserted platform, Sena lowered Kozue from her back and gently laid her against the wall. Sena's expression was stiff. With only a single glance toward Kozue, she shifted her gaze back to the station premises. Glaring motionlessly at a certain point in the distance, she gritted her teeth. Well, I hear a Noah terminal in the background, so Suwa must be already working his magic.
やっと見つけた。
At the end of her gaze. Oh! I wasn't expecting to see you here. What are you doing here? In the dark recesses of the platform, two figures stood shoulder to shoulder. One was a tall man wearing an expensive suit. His whole body exuded an aura of refinement. He had excellent posture, and a relaxed smile rested on his lips. The other was a homeless man clad in filthy rags. His hair was unkempt and shaggy, and his face was covered in stubble. The man's head was hung low, rendering his expression difficult to accurately discern. Their appearances contrasted violently. But the two men did nothing but stand silently on the dim, empty station platform. Sena felt nothing but raw hatred toward the both of them. Neosekken Genichi and Hatano Issei. Even if she wanted to forget about them, she would never have been able to.
母さんと妹を殺した。その二人が揃ってお出迎えか。
A long time ago, her mother and her little sister had met their gruesome ends right before her eyes. And the people before her now were the very people who had killed them.
私の本意ではなかったんだ、セナ。
With his head still hung low, the homeless man, Hatano, let out a desolate murmur.
あの実験を止めようとした。だが、私一人では動き出した歯車は止められなかった。この男が。
Hatano took a fleeting glance at Neose's expression. Neose said nothing. His composed attitude remained unmoving.
この男が実験の継続を指示した。私はあの結果を望んではいなかった。悪いのはこの男、ノロセなんだ。分かってくれ、セナ。
Neose isn't actually here, is he? This is a delusion that's being conjured up right now. None of this exchange isn't actually happening, is it? Sena's repugnance billowed as she listened to his words of repentance.
お前は母さんと妹を見殺しにした。それが厳然とした事実だ。悔いているならどうして逃げた？
世界を 守るためだ。
でたらめを。
親に逆らうのは感心しませんね。
It was the first time Neosekken had spoken.
確かに君の家族が悲劇的な結末を迎えたのは私が指示した結果です。もう十分データは取れていたのでね。実に有意義な実験でした。
有意義。
Sena swiftly rebooted the D-sword she had held in her hands. The resulting shockwave stirred her long black hair.
この男を殺せせな。こいつが元凶だ。
言われなくても。
Sena had already kicked powerfully off the platform. Without brandishing her sword, she closed the distance. A phenomenal display of her explosive power. Her target, Neosekken. She mowed him down for D-sword. Even the air was torn to shreds. Neosekken's head tore free and flew away from its source. Yeah, this is just confirmation to me. This isn't actually happening. There's no way he'd go down this easily. We already saw that with the last episode of the previous story arc. He's a fighter. Sena followed it with her eyes, when suddenly, Neosekken's flying head distorted mid-flight and transformed into that of her father's. Stunned, she looked at the headless body that stood before her. He had been wearing a suit only a moment ago, but now it donned the clothes of a homeless man. Devoid now of any and all power, it tumbled backward lifelessly. And that was a dirty trick. Eyes wide as could be, Sena looked at Hatano, who had been standing just beside it. He turned to face her in return. His bearded face warped into a vicious sneer. His face contorted as if a mosaic had been affixed to it, and his body contorted in a similar fashion. The very next instant, Hatano took on the face of a man Sena did not recognize. His age, his face, his aura, they all differed greatly from her father's. Sena was overwhelmed with confusion. She took another unblinking look at the head she had just severed. After tracing an arc as it flew, it had splattered blood upon where it struck the concrete. It was her father's face. It was her father's head. Sena could not look away. An illusion made by a delusion. You know, I just realized this is a problem because he was the only person who knows where Noah 2 is being kept. And I don't think he's had. And from what I've been seeing, from how this whole scene played out, I don't think there's really any way for him to have left anybody any kind of message to indicate its location. So yeah, we've just made our own job and actually finding Noah 2 a hell of a lot harder now. Not good. Realizing that, Sena's breathing grew shallow and ragged.
Sena-chan sa.
The man who was supposed to be her father, the man who was now a completely different person, spoke Sena's name in a far too friendly way.
君が今やったことって結局お父さんと同じっすよね。
It was the result she had longed for all throughout these past 6 months. It was a result it should have been. It should have been, and yet, Sena was assailed by a fierce inner turmoil. Her father, who had been reduced to just a head, had his eyes trained directly on Sena.
父親の首跳ねて殺すってえぐいな。
父さん。
Still not comprehending why she was experiencing such psychological shock, Sena heard something tear deep inside her ears. I heard a voice. The scream of Sena's mind. A scream which cursed reality. A scream which emulated madness. I followed that cry all the way to Shinsen Station. But by the time I got there, it was already too late. When I set foot onto the dim platform, the faint smell of blood hung in the air. Kosubi was lying against the wall, unconscious. And there on the platform was Sena, sunk to the ground, with her back facing me. Her head was pointed down, and her long hair was covering her face. I couldn't see her expression. Right beside her was a headless body. It then occurred to me that the round object lying a few meters away was the head that had once been attached to it. It was Hatano-san. The moment I realized that, I bit my lip hard.
こいつはラッキーっすね。
A man was standing on the tracks. Contrasting heavily with the suit he was wearing, he had a rucksack on his back. A harsh mechanical noise was emanating from it. Suwa Mamoru, a detective from the Metropolitan Police Department's Investigation Division. This wasn't the first time I'd run into him. And I knew exactly what he'd done.
もともとは目障りな畑の親子を処分しに来たんすけどね。西条くん、君が自分から火に飛び込んできてくれて感謝感激っす。君を見かけたら捕まえろってことになってるんすよ。
誰に？
内緒っす。
He smiled a flippant smile, one that was somewhat reminiscent of Detective Bond's. But there was one key difference. Detective Bond's smile had always been just an act meant to throw people off or rile them up. When it came to Suwa, however, this sly smile was who he truly was.
あんたは野呂瀬の居場所を知ってる？
西条くんさ。
Suwa heaved a sigh as he shook his head in an exaggerated manner.
口の聞き方に気をつけてほしいっすね。自分の方が年上っすよ。
You're older than me, and you act like a kid, and you act like an overgrown child with a magnifying glass, seeing a whole pile of ants to incinerate with it. That's you, Suwa. With my eyes still trained on Suwa, I cautiously jumped down from the platform and onto the tracks. Sena was still motionless, so I ended up effectively shielding her back.
アンっていう人を殺したのはあんただ。
だから
刑事のくせに人を殺すなんて。
君には言われたくないっす。
I gripped my D sword tightly.
あんたみたいなやつに敬語を使う義理なんてないよ。
あのさ、お前に言われたくねえって言ってるんだよ。
Even from this distance, it was clear to see. The smile on Sua's face had disappeared.
お前も人殺しだろ。違うとは言わせないぞ。お前は葉月志乃を殺した。
I'm not the one who stuck the scalpel in her own throat. Just so you know.
俺は今すぐにでもお前 をぶち殺したいんだよ。
Well, then, by all means, do it. Come on, tough guy. Hazuki Shino, the nurse who had been the real New Gen culprit. She and Suwa were both disciples of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light. Was that all? I gulped audibly.
信仰の救いのためにそれは自制するが、その代わり俺が責任持って心を殺してやる。
Well, considering how much pain and distress and, well, just sheer agony, really, that you've undoubtedly inflicted, that you and your sweetheart undoubtedly inflicted on, well, not just the victims of your little scheme, but the friends and families of those who knew these victims of yours. I hope you'll forgive me when when my response to you is to simply say, shove it up your ass, and go cry to someone who cares. You've got no room whatsoever to criticize me for this shit, you psychotic son of a bitch. I attempted to brandish my D-sword, but it was obvious I wouldn't be able to do anything. It was just a reflex. And, just like I'd expected, I wasn't able to do anything at all. Hey, buddy! Where's your friends? I found myself in a dimly lit room. In that room was a single man, talking to another much older man, though through a large screen.
諏訪君、君と葉月君にやってもらいたい修行があるのだ。
はい、何なりと。
人を殺してもらいたい。
相手は誰ですか？
相手が何者かに意味はない。
と申しますと？
特に決まりはないと言っておこう。殺す対象、殺し方はこちらで指示する。我らが進めているプロジェクトノアを完成させるため、西条匠という少年に心理的揺さぶりをかける必要があるのだ。
揺さぶりですか？
恐怖を与えるのだ。しかしその少年の秘めた力は強大だ。直接的な行動はこちらの身に危険を及ぼしかねん。故に連続猟奇殺人事件を起こす。
たったそれだけのために殺人を？
不満かね？
シノもその修行に参加しなければなりませんか？
当然だ。これは信仰の理想郷を築くためであり、同時に君たちに信仰の救いをもたらすだろう。
そういうことであれば。
時に葉月君はお腹に君の子を授かっていたな。予定日はいつかね？
あと2ヶ月ほどです。
その子供、信仰の救いのために捧げたまえ。
殺せとおっしゃいますか？
聖なる犠牲だよ。こう捧げれば君と葉月君には大いなる信仰の救いがもたらされるだろう。
You're a sick bastard, you know that?
大いなる信仰の救い。
And so are you for just going along with this, Suwa.
かしこまりました。すべて教祖様の仰せのままに。きっとシノも喜びます。信仰の救いあれ。
Well, Guess that pretty much confirms everything that I've been suspecting. Sua's relationship to Hazuki, her child that she used in the man-child killing being both their child. I was indeed correct. Yeah, and just when I thought that particular murder couldn't get any more sick than it already was, along comes this little scene to prove just how wrong my initial assumption was. Suddenly, an insanely powerful wind blew against me. It pushed me backward hard, nearly knocking me over. I tried desperately to brace myself against it. However, my body didn't do what I asked. Instead, my body curled up into a ball on the spot. My body wouldn't listen to me. It moved by itself. It was like my body wasn't my own. Wait a minute. This rooftop. Is this the same rooftop where the group dive happened? Before I knew it, my surroundings had gone completely dark. When I looked below, I saw the nightscape spreading out before me. If I didn't know any better, I could have easily mistaken all the lights as a sky full of stars. I suddenly realized I was standing somewhere ridiculously high up. Beside me were 4 men and women I'd never met. No, I knew one of them. Yua. For some reason, though, she wasn't wearing her glasses. No, that wasn't Yua. It was Mia, Yua's younger twin sister, the one who should have died a month ago. Which meant this was the roof of Cornelius Tower. My body wasn't my own. I was wearing a school uniform I didn't recognize. Even the body type was brawnier than my own. So I'm just going through Sua's memories of the new gen killings. Is that what's happening right now? Am I going to see all the others too? Oh, whoops. Well, if that's the case, then... Oh, shit. I'm gonna... Don't tell me you're gonna make me suffer through the man-child killing again. Please don't. My body wasn't my own. I was wearing a school uniform I didn't recognize. Even the body type was brawnier than my own. And when I saw that there were 4 other people huddled together on the ground, wailing loudly as tears poured down their faces, it led me to guess what exactly was happening. This body that my consciousness had invaded belonged to one of the 5 victims who died in the first New Gen case, the group dive. Through no will of my own, my field vision, ever so slowly, panned over toward the helipad. Shogun had filmed the video, so he should have been here somewhere. There. Shogun was wearing a Darth Spire helmet on his head, and a black cloak draped over his body. When Shogun had cornered me at O-Front, he'd been wearing something similar. But was this guy actually Shogun? No. His legs were slightly peeking out from his black cloak. He was very clearly wearing slacks. In addition, his legs were thick, like those of a healthy adult male's. They weren't the skinny, pathetic legs that belonged to Shogun, to Nishijo Takumi. No bones protruded from them. And when I looked closer, I realized that even his sitting height was completely different. The cloak kept them hidden, but his shoulders also looked fairly broad. At the very least, the man wasn't Nishisho Takemi. And he wasn't carrying a video camera. Suddenly, from the darkness spreading out behind the fake shogun, I heard footsteps. Dragging footsteps. Not just one set of them. It wasn't a hallucination. The strange footsteps belonged to many, many people. There had to be several dozen unknown entities lurking in the darkness. The footsteps hadn't been in the video that had been uploaded on YouTube. Not to mention there shouldn't have been any way for this many people to have gained access to the helipad. Then, what the hell was this sound? The four others beside me continued to wail in grief. Through no will of my own, my body similarly let out a cry, and then began to tremble. Something was coming closer. If I was in a low-budget horror movie, these dragging footsteps would have been zombies. Zombies with both arms hanging down and limply in front of them. Their decaying bodies slowly swaying as they walked. But that was just in the movies. In reality, and especially in 21st century Tokyo, there was no way a horde of zombies could possibly just show up like that. But if that was the case, then what were they? My heart felt like it was going to seize up in terror. I wanted to look away. But the owner of the body I'd invaded refused to do so. Finally, the unknown entities began to emerge from the darkness. They choked all remaining space on the helipad, sealing off our escape route. I wasn't sure if I was right to call it anticlimactic, but the ones who appeared were perfectly normal people. They wore suits, school uniforms, parkas, and they were of different ages and sexes. But they were still all people you'd expect to find walking around Shibuya at night. Save for one thing. Every one of the nearly 100 people there was gripping some sort of bladed object. Not one of them said a word, nor even tried to. All I could be heard was their raspy, nasal breaths, pulling together to an abysmal cacophony. For some reason, I couldn't see their expressions very well. It was like their faces were made of paint that had been blurred by water. Their faces were blurry and disfigured. Were their faces actually deformed? Or was my sight itself the problem? I didn't know. They were sluggishly, yet steadily, coming toward us. They were like robots that had been programmed with a single mission. I thought that perhaps the fake shogun was ordering them around, but that didn't seem to be the case. Every once in a while, he would move his wheelchair forward slightly, only to freeze once again and not move a single inch beyond that. The 5 people had all been cornered, and now they had nowhere to run. In order to escape from the 180-meter high rooftop, they had no choice but to dive. Grasping their blades, the mob grew closer. Closer and closer, little by little. Eventually they were within reaching distance. And yet, even in these final moments, they all stayed completely silent. As well as this, even as they drew nearer and nearer, they didn't make any attempt to jump on any of the victims. But this strange behavior only served to make them all the more terrifying. Terrifying enough to make me think. I need to get out of here, even if it means I have to jump.
その目誰の目
I heard an unexpected voice. The voice of the real Shogun, Nishijo Takumi. However, I hadn't heard from the man wearing the Darth Spider helmet, but from overhead. And it seemed like I hadn't been the only one to hear it. As if they'd rehearsed it, the five court people all stood up, joined hands with one another, and looked up at the night sky. Naturally, only the starry sky spread across the night. Shogun was nowhere to be found. Mind reading.
その目誰の？
My field vision slowly panned. And then, I saw something strange. Even though the nightscape should have been the only thing spreading out below me, I saw a long flight of stairs stretching downward. It led right to the roof of the adjacent building, not Sign City, which was across a metropolitan highway. But the building nestled up close to Cornelius Tower, so that's how they got tricked into jumping. A building nestled close to Cornelius Tower. A fact that didn't make any sense, because no such building existed in reality. Even so, the five people held no suspicions that the staircase was delusionary. All I thought about was how they had been saved by it. These thoughts, these emotions, were conveyed distinctly to me, and then, with only them in mind, they stepped forward, hand in hand. They had yet to let go even once. It was exactly how the group dive had ended. None of them had possessed any desire to dive. So when the staircase they had been so convinced was real disappeared, the feeling of empty air deeply shocked them, and, as they fell, they screamed from the deepest depths of their hearts. Falling, wind pressure violently assaulted my body. The shrieks of the girl next to me emulated howls of the most horrifying, terrifying beasts. She clutched my hand so tightly, her nails dug into my flesh. It took time for us to fall. Those 100 meters felt like an eternity. The dark earth rushed toward us. Our surroundings were so dark. I started hallucinating about falling into a never-ending abyss, one that endlessly sucked me down deeper and deeper. And then, the bodies of the five people collided with the earth. With a sickening crunch. They were pulverized. The pain struck without me expecting it. A single blow that led straight to death. The impact felt like my entire body had exploded, and had been ground into a fine powder from the inside out. I felt a sensation in my heart violently contracting from the shock. And then, my consciousness was severed. My eyes were forced open, and a new scene burst forth in front of me. I was walking down Tamagawara Dori. My body was completely intact, yet the sensation of crashing to the ground remained distinct. Through no will of my own, I was walking down the street as if it were any other day. This body was in more shape than my own. This wasn't me. I had a terrible feeling about this. Suddenly, I noticed a strange man walking toward me. And when I saw him, I was forced to acknowledge that my terrible feeling had been warranted. The man passed me. He was wearing a fairly normal suit, but on his head, he had a Darth Spider helmet. It was all too surreal. There wasn't anyone else around. I wanted to run away as soon as possible. And yet, despite my wishes, the owner of the body my consciousness had invaded looked over their shoulder at the man he had just passed. Darth Spider was right behind me. He was so close, I could almost feel his breath. And then, bursting out of my blind spot, his fist flew straight into my stomach. All the strength left my body, and my vision went black. Not long after I lost consciousness, I began to feel an intense, searing pain spreading throughout my abdomen. Please don't be the man-child. God damn it! Oh, come on. I gotta relive this now from the perspective of the victim? Why are you doing this to me? When I opened my eyes, I was in an operating room. Oh, sweet Jesus. Okay. I guess I should just suck it up and prepare myself. Okay, let's get this over with. When I opened my eyes, I was in an operating room. Wearing only white scrubs, Hazuki Shino was standing in front of me. Her scrubs were wide open, revealing her bloodied abdomen. Even though her face was a sickly pale, she looked at me with a gentle smile. In her hand was a scalpel. A scalpel she slowly laid against my stomach. She applied some pressure, and with a slight ripping sound, a small incision appeared on my skin. Blood spurted from the wound, dancing through the air before landing on Hazuki Shino's face. And yet, despite that, the same bright smile stayed plastered on her face. I watched in horror and pain as she slowly sliced me open. I had seen this scene once before, back when I had read Hazuki's memories. The man-child case. The pain in my stomach was becoming unbearable. Screaming and sobbing, I tried to escape somehow by thrashing around, but my limbs were all fastened to the bed. I was unable to move. Any movement would lead to the pain in my abdomen growing far more intense.
信仰の救いをあなたに。
With her hand resting upon my cleanly sliced open skin, Hazuki began poking around in the gushing wound of her fingers. God, that alone pierced me with enough agony to shatter my mind. I could very clearly feel the sensation of her fingers writhing around inside me. And then, just as I had seen in her memories, Hazuki forcefully widening the wound from both sides. The sensation of skin and flesh tearing. God damn it! The lack of anesthesia left the pain raw and unfiltered, causing me, along with the owner of the body, to lose consciousness, only to be woken up immediately after by the overwhelming pain. But Hazuki kept forcefully widening the wound all the same. Details no longer mattered to me, such as where it hurt, or where specifically in my body the pain was erupting from. I hallucinated all my nerve endings being pierced with searing hot needles. I passed out again, but I couldn't escape. The pain mercilessly forced my consciousness back awake. I let my body writhe in pain. I found myself thinking that if it would release me from this suffering, I'd be willing to bite my tongue off. But just as I thought that, I saw something. There in Hazuki's hand was a blood-soaked fetus, something that served only to make her smile all the more revolting. This one was well and truly insane. She took the corpse of the fetus she had removed from her own body, and then plunged it deep inside my abdomen. Her hand and the fetus she was gripping tightly in it, shoved inside my organs, gouged out my flesh, and gnawed deeper and deeper into me.
I think I'm gonna vomit.
I began to vomit blood, but even though it threatened to suffocate me, gargling screams rose from my drowning throat without end. Perhaps due to the pain overloading my brain, my head felt strangely foggy. And yet, despite that fogginess, the pain refused to get any more bearable, and I began to comprehend less and less of what was happening. Pain was all that ruled my mind. Hazuki then withdrew her hand from my stomach and nodded in satisfaction. Then, as if attending to a patient, she spoke a few words to me. But the very second she finished speaking, She suddenly lost consciousness, and her body collapsed to the floor. At around the same time, someone else entered the operating room, the sound of his shoes reverberating throughout it. But I had no interest in whoever it was. The sole thing I focused on was continuing my bawling and screaming, unable to feel anything but agony. Seeing the unnatural expansion of my stomach, I fell into a panic. Along with the pain, I began to feel an itchiness. It was itchy. Really, really itchy. I wanted to scratch it, but my hands were tied to the bed, so I couldn't. Suddenly, a shadow obstructed my view. It was Darth Spider, peering from almost nowhere. He picked up Hazuki in his arms, exited the operating room with her, then came back alone a few moments later. He was carrying a sewing needle and some nylon thread. What was he thinking, I didn't know, until he slowly began to stitch together the wound on my stomach. The pain was practically nothing compared to the pain of having a foreign object shoved inside me, nor the agony of having my flesh ripped open. Please stop. Darth Spider's sewing was incredibly sloppy. Even a grade schooler could have done better. Every time he pulled at the fishing line, it chapped against the chasms he'd opened in my skin. The itchiness grew more intense. An unbearable itchiness. An itchiness that seemed to well up from deep inside me. Itchy. 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 I wanted to scratch it. If he'd just let me, I wouldn't even mind if I died. The tingling itch combined with the pain. And yet, even more than the pain, the itch threatened to drive me completely insane. Oh, fuck. Is it over? Please tell me it's over. Wasn't as bad as the first time, somehow, but still was very unpleasant for me to read through all the same. And imagine. Due to my mental state, it took me a while to notice that the scenery had changed once again. I felt slight relief from the pain and the itchiness, but the sensation had completely disappeared. I'll take that as a yes, that it's over. Oh, thank God. Even now as I stumbled through a Shinsen, I felt an itch in the center of my body. But along that itch, I felt the sensation of a foreign object in my abdomen, as well as the pain of a needle weaving in and out of my body. They all remained as distinct, lingering discomforts, continuing to torment my mind even now. I was on an unlit, rarely used road. As I walked down it, I saw a figure coming toward me. The road was so narrow, we would have had to turn sideways in order to even pass each other. But when I saw what the figure looked like, my body turned to ice. Yet again, it was the man dressed as Darth Spider. We passed each other. Darth Spider didn't give any kind of reaction. My heart was beating out of my chest. And then something surfaced in my mind. An incredibly compulsive urge. One that made no sense for me to feel. A crusty old fuck had been hitting on my girl. It pissed me off like you wouldn't believe. I wanted to kill him. That extremely abrupt feeling drove me forward. The face of my girl was foggy in my memories. I couldn't remember her very well, to the point where I wasn't sure if she even existed in the first place. Probably didn't. Could just be false memories. And yet, the crusty old fuck who'd been hitting on my girl was crystal clear in my mind. I'd seen his face before. He was the victim of the crucifixion case. My memory launched forward, placing me in a dark, narrow alley. An alley I knew all too well. The scene of the crucifixion. And right in front of me was the victim of that case. He was a middle-aged man, and my hands were wrapped tightly around his neck. His body convulsed violently, bubbles frothed from his mouth, and his eyes rolled into the back of his head. Upon learning what it felt like to have someone's life disappear in my hands, I went slightly cold. Eventually, the man stopped moving. When Komeda, the perpetrator of his case, confirmed he was dead, I released my hands from his neck and let him collapse to the ground. Wait a minute, isn't he the guy that I gave him a single parting kick inside and then immediately went to leave? I heard a voice, and when I turned around, the man who was supposed to be dead was getting up. I still rolled into the back of his head, and then he reached for me. With a yelp, I punched him, knocking him to the ground. But even though his movements were sluggish, he kept getting back up no matter how many times I hit him. I grabbed his neck again. Just as I'd done earlier, but this time with even more force. I wrung my hands tightly around his neck. I put all the strength I had into my grip, applying enough pressure to snap the bones in his neck. He soon stopped moving again. This time, I put my ear up to his mouth, and once I made absolutely sure he wasn't breathing, I let him drop. I watched his body for a while. And then, somehow, the man who should have died twitched violently and began rising back to his feet. The expression on his face was one clearly fitting of a dead man's, and it didn't change even slightly as he moved. Rising up from the ground, he started coming toward me. As I stumbled back in fear, I stepped on something. Startled, I looked down at my feet. A large number of cross-shaped stakes were scattered across the street. I had to stop him from moving anymore. I had to drive a stake into the monster I was facing. If I didn't, I'd be screwed. Overwhelmed by the impending danger, I shoved the man against the wall before he could finish getting up. I picked up a stake, and before I knew it, I was gripping a hammer in my other hand. As I was about to say, he was the man that this Komeda fellow. Wasn't he the same man that I saw get arrested for one of the new gen murders a little while back? If it is, then well, I guess they did get their perp. At least when you look at it from a certain point of view. Once again, I found myself in an operating room. But this wasn't the man-child case. Fucking hell. Not the doctor. Come on, man. The man-child death was bad enough. Now I have to know what it's like to get my brain scooped out with a spoon. I'm telling you, the writer's out to get me. I swear to God. The truth is, I'm the real Takumi. And this game I'm playing right now is one giant psychological attack against me. Someone thinks I'm a gigalomaniac and they're trying to get me to awaken. Alright, so there's how many of these murders were there? 6? I think there was like 6 of these murders, right? 6, 7, somewhere around there. Hopefully I'm just halfway through these. Once again, I found myself in an operating room. But it wasn't a man-child case again. Despite knowing that, The pain from that experience, coupled to the sensation of a foreign object in my stomach, continued to torture me. It ground away at my each and every nerve ending. I could see two figures in my field of vision. They were both still as could be, staring in my direction with bated breath. One of them was Darth Spider. Oh, so you watched what Husky did to this guy too, huh? Fucking voyeur. And the other was Husky Shino. Her scrubs weren't soaked in blood this time, which is what led me to believe that this was a different case than the man-child one. I was lying in a bed. A needle for an IV was embedded in my arm. However, nothing was being injected to me. The liquid in the tube was flowing backward. And the liquid was blood. Oh, wait, no, this is the vampire case, isn't it? My blood, the blood that circulated within his body, was being sucked out through the IV. At the end of the tube, there was only an extremely dirty bucket. It was filled to the brim with blood. The blood continued to fall into the bucket. Drip, drip, drip. My head felt fuzzy. I was incredibly dizzy. I was assailed by an intensely peculiar sensation, one where a pleasant feeling, like my consciousness was floating far away, intermixed with the pain and itchiness left over from the man-child case. Then, as if showing off to me, Darth Spider and Husky tenderly embraced each other like lovers. Oh, fuck off! As the two supported one another, Husky's face couldn't have looked happier. I couldn't understand how she could make a face like that, while in the middle of creating the dried-up corpse from the vampire case. Because they're insane! But before I could think about why I couldn't understand it, the pain grew far more intense. My throat was sapped of all moisture, my vision gradually darkened, and my consciousness slowly grew thinner and thinner, until eventually it evaporated completely. I then realized this was a vicarious experience. I was being forced to experience the series of New Gen murders vicariously. I was facing the pain of each case. The fear. One by one. If that was true, then there were still 3 remaining. Realizing that, my despair pulled me down even deeper.
先生
Okay, she addressed me as sensei, so I think this is the numbskull case for sure. Well, I know what's coming. Better prepare myself. Again. Someone called out to me, and I came back to myself. I should have been in the operating room, but I was standing in the hallway of some hospital.
高階先生
Unsurprisingly, through no will of my own, my body turned around. Behind me was Husky Shino, accompanied by a somewhat somber expression.
折り入ってご相談があるんですが、ここだと人目につきますから、こっちに。
Hazuki, your mouth is not moving again. Again, I implore you. Or, well, at least I would have if none of this stuff didn't already actually happen. You would have been much better off being a ventriloquist than a homicidal nurse for a doomsday cult. Just saying. Her voice apologetic, Husky entered an examination room. My mind screamed, "Don't go," at Dr. Takashina, but, unsurprisingly, my voice didn't reach him. It was currently after hours at the hospital, so no one else was in the exam room. Husky walked steadily toward the center of it. I, Dr. Takashina, followed her without even the slightest doubt. And then she abruptly stopped. Just as I wondered what she was doing, a man wearing something black on his head leapt out from the darkness. I reeled back, startled, only for the man to shove something akin to a piece of gauze over my mouth. And just like that, my consciousness was stolen away. Some kind of anesthetic? God! An ear-piercing noise ran through my head. My skull was vibrating violently. But it wasn't just vibrating. It was being shaved to dust. I felt that sensation incredibly clearly. The sound died down when I opened my eyes, yada yada. Like a collection of numerous eyes, many lights bore down on me from the ceiling. They shone down on me brilliantly, illuminating my face.
頭蓋骨が外れましたよ、先生。まあ、先生の硬膜、とても綺麗だわ。
In a thoroughly enchanted tone, Husky said those words, picked up a pair of scissors, and used them to cut away the solid membrane covering my brain. I felt the sensation directly, and immediately following it, I was seized by a sickening, almost frustrating feeling. I, or rather Dr. Takashina, hadn't known that Husky had the ability to perform surgery, let alone open brain surgery. As a result of this, my mind erupted with surprise, followed by me noticing my body was incapable of moving due to the anesthesia. Husky wasn't alone in the operating room. The man wearing black from before, Darth Spider, was there too. But he said nothing. He simply stood in place, not moving a muscle.
人は脳死状態でも人工呼吸器なしで1週間以上生きたっていう事例があるんです。ご存知ですか？
Without losing the gentle smile on her face, Husky then whispered something strange in my ear.
それってつまり脳がなくてもしばらくは生きていられるっていうことですよね。先生はどれくらい生きられるかしら。
I shuddered. An unfathomable terror rose up from within me. Husky held a spoon in front of my eyes, only for it to leave my vision soon after.
高階先生に信仰の救いあれ。
Without warning, I felt a foreign object being forced into me inside my head. And not inside my head in the sense that it wasn't really happening. Something had literally been forced inside my head. I felt the sensation of something entering me and then moving around. There was no pain. However, it was more than enough to fill me with disgust and terror. Husky shook off a piece of something onto the tray sitting beside me. Only moving my eyes, I looked over to try to see what it was. It was a beautiful pink color, but it had been smashed into a pulp. It reminded me of a soft salmon roe. Realizing it was my brain, my sense of dread peaked. I pleaded with her. Please stop. But Husky's hand didn't stop moving. Instead, her expression turned to one of pure ecstasy. Her cheeks were stained a bright scarlet as she carelessly dug through my, Dr. Takashina's brain, taking more of it with every scoop. Suddenly, I was having fun. I wanted to laugh. Suddenly, I harbored an intense hatred. Suddenly, I felt happy. Fucking hell! Suddenly, a furious lust burned within me, rising up and constricting my chest. She stirred my brain, stirring my emotions along with it. Jesus Christ. That was awful. 4 down, 2 to go. Alright, come on, man. You can do this. Emotions different to what I myself felt boiled up within me. Because of these emotions, my mind, heart, and soul were drifting away from the consciousness known as me, forcing me to confront the ambiguity of my own existence. And as the mental rape that sought to deny my own existence tore my mind to shreds, I found myself walking under a railway overpass. If I went off the case order, this time, it would be the finger food case. As I expected would happen, my body was now a woman's. I was incredibly hungry. Perhaps the victim had been on a diet or something. Funny that she was hungry right when the finger food incident happened. Now that I know the writer of this game is just being cheeky. I crossed paths with the man in the Darth Spire costume once again. Everywhere I went, he would show up. Considering how much his appearance stood out, why hadn't the police or mass media gotten anything on him at all? It was the first time Darth Spire had said anything. He pointed at my right hand as he spoke. It was a surreal spectacle. For some reason, I was holding 5 bare chicken skewers, and each one sticking out from the gaps between my fingers. Oh no. A warm-looking steam rose from them, as did the juicy aroma of cooked meat. Both things further stimulated my appetite. Saliva overflowed from my mouth. Unable to wait another second, I took a bite. A sharp pain shot through my finger, but I couldn't stop chewing. I had never had such incredible, delicious chicken in my entire life. Tons of juices escaped from the meat, dribbling down onto the pavement below. It was delectable. It was to die for. Literally! In the blink of an eye, I had cleaned his skewers completely. Before I knew it, Darth Spider had disappeared. But it didn't matter much to me. I didn't even care about that strange man at all. I wanted to keep eating. My stomach cried out for more food. The fingers on my right hand throbbed with pain, but my hunger easily overrode it. Once again, I looked at my right hand, and that's when I realized I hadn't just been holding chicken skewers. I had also been carrying a large slab of meat. The glorious protein was still fastened to the bone, with its dripping juices staining the sleeves of my blouse a dark shade of red. When had I gotten my hands on this? How long had I had it for? That question, too, quickly became unimportant when faced with my overwhelming hunger. I sank my teeth into the meat with all the strength I could muster. Excruciating pain. I ripped a chunk off, chewed it, tasted it, and then gulped it down. The meat was tender, and it carried a fair amount of fat. I bit deeper. Fuck. Both my hands and the area around my mouth were greasy with fat, but I didn't care. I never experienced such incredible flavor before. I tore the meat off the bone. Fat melted and gushed through my mouth, leaving a unique aftertaste. It hurt. For some reason it hurt so bad I thought I would die, but I kept chewing. Compared to how large the bone was, there wasn't a lot of meat on it. It didn't take long for me to eat it all up. Finally, I licked off all the remaining tiny scraps of flesh that were left clinging to the bone. Fuck. Every piece I set free, I suckled on, savoring a taste of meat and bone. The 5 slender bones protruding from the ends weren't too hard. If I wanted to, I could bite them off, and I gnawed on the bones. A fierce pain ripped through me, pain so intense I nearly collapsed on the spot. Tears streamed out of my face. I gleefully slurped all the remaining juices that were oozing out from inside the bones. God damn! I tore free one of the bones. The intense stimulus led me to crumple to the ground, rolling around in my mouth as I did. Chomp, crunch, crunch. When I went to swallow it, the bone got stuck in my throat, and I could no longer breathe. My legs swung around uncontrollably, kicking every which way. Before I knew it, a string had been wrapped around my ankles, stopping them in place. I could no longer move freely. Darth Spire was standing in front of me. Writhing in agony, the exposed bones of my right hand struck the ground. The impact sent violent rippling waves of pain throughout my entire body, and I immediately pissed myself. And I would never open my eyes again. I opened my eyes in a dim back alley. The scenery was a little different from before. I was walking down the alley while leaning on a male Dokyun's shoulder. His face was horribly beaten, and looked like he was about to cry. The three of them, including me, were in awful condition. Their clothes were soaked with blood. Their faces were ridiculously swollen, and they all had a number of chipped teeth. Should be the last one, yeah? The person who'd done this was probably me. It was the three Dokyuns that beat me up. And after that, they'd had their torsos torn apart and died. Once again, the man in the Darth Spire costume was there, standing at the end of where we were walking. The guy who was lending me his shoulder shouted at Darth Spire, but with his face as it was, any impact it could have had was pretty much halved. One of them grabbed Darth Spire. Holding him by the collar, he lifted him up, then hit his black helmet of his hand. He forced the helmet off. I'd already predicted the face that would be under it, and of course, there he was. Sua Mamoru, looking completely unfazed. He was Hazuki Shino's accomplice, so he was another culprit behind Nugin. Sua rammed his knee deep into the stomach of the man grabbing him. His agile movement set him far apart from the reckless violence of the Dokyuns. The ground shook slightly. Behind Sua, there was a presence, hiding in the darkness deep within the narrow alley. Something was there, rumbling with an eerie growl, and from what I could tell, it wasn't a normal size. Even though we couldn't see it, the fierce bloodlust given off by that monster made all of our hearts seize up. Eventually, with footsteps that sounded like the very ground itself was rumbling, it showed itself. A literal, real-life monster. It was so unbelievably grotesque. Nothing else like it existed on this earth. Looks like a Resident Evil monster. Kinda. Its brown, slimy skin glistened, and its gigantic head sat wedged between its shoulders. Its scarlet eyes shone brightly. Its mouth tore open on both sides, and its wrists were as thick as giant logs. The bipedal monster came up beside Sua and opened its gaping maw wide as could be. Its rows of sharp fangs glistened, reflecting the burning glare of the streetlights. "So, Hazuki, is this your true form?" Its roar was like a low, dull growl, and yet it was more terrifying than anything I had ever heard. No beast could have ever hoped to compare. A roar with such ferocity, even the very souls of all who heard it would tremble.
なんだこれ。
スパークオーズが好きなんすよ。
Sua was the only one who didn't seem bothered by the monster's appearance. On the contrary, he touched the monster's leg in blatant satisfaction, caressing it.
それに出てくるエイリアンっす。
Another roar. The monster stepped one step closer to the frozen still trio. We tried to run, but there was no escape. We screamed for help, but there was no one around for kilometers. An overwhelming difference in power. The difference in potential between our species was too great. 3 of us were helpless when faced with the beast before us. For the first time in our lives, we experienced fear from the deepest depths of our hearts. When someone is frightened like that, they fall silent, shrink back, and can't move even a single muscle. And so, the monster let out a single breath, and swung its log-like arms. In an instant, as if they were mere rag dolls, the 2 of them were torn to shreds. Blood and viscera spattered across the alley, steam rising from the remains. The severed corpses of the 2 men were then viciously tossed aside, skewering them on the handles of a nearby telephone pole.
あとは君だけっすよ。
Sua's gaze pierced through me. I realized then that he was the one controlling the alien. I told myself this was a delusion, but there was no point. In the face of absolute terror and overwhelming brutality, I simply slumped to the ground and pissed myself. All I could do after that was look up in a daze at the monster. And then... My torso was ripped apart. I felt this in a way no other human could ever possibly experience. And then, I stopped breathing. How many times had I died vicariously? 6! 3 times? 1 time? 7 times? 4 times? 2 times? 5 times? Human flesh tasted amazing. It hurt. No more. Darth Spire's outfit was surreal. It had to be a joke. So wait. How many times had I died? Wait, who died? Not me. I wasn't dead. That monster was seriously straight out of a horror movie. That monster was from, Sua said it was from Spark Wars. So what? Human flesh tasted amazing. The bones, too. Why was Darth Spire black? Hazuki Shino was sexy, but she was scary. She was crazy, but that was what made her sexy. I'm sure Sua thinks so. If Darth Spider was made of bones, what was human flesh? How many times had I died in this prank? Or what was it a prank? No, I wasn't dead. I was dead. Well, which is it, man? Are you dead or are you not? Death. Dead. It was surreal. No more. No, there were bones. I don't want to die. Black. I died. So kill me. It's over. Finally. I can rest easy. Relatively speaking. We're still in danger, so I mean, I can't truly relax, but still. At least all that unpleasantness is over. I hope. Inside the rucksack, Sua wore on his back. The poor let out a strange mechanical sound. Sua had long since grown accustomed to hearing it. And because of that sound, he had been able to murder the heart and mind of the gigolomaniac, Nishijo Takumi. He lifted up a heartfelt prayer in gratitude. No matter what, Sua would have never let Nishijo Takumi get away with what he had done. For the boy had driven Hazuki to suicide. Hazuki was Sua's childhood friend, whom he had lived with ever since he was born. Sua recalled what she had told him several years ago, back when he had decided to aspire to become a detective, and she to be a nurse.
私、守の子供を産みたい。
You're actually going to try to make me feel sorry for these people. Really? Don't waste your time. It's not going to work. Both of their parents were disciples of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light, and God and the glorious founder had been in their lives ever since birth. Sua and Hazuki had both been raised as children of the Divine Light, and their betrothal was the will of the glorious founder as well. And so, the two of them dutifully obeyed the teachings of the Divine Light, going so far as to offer the life of their child within Hazuki's womb. Even when Hazuki had given her life as a martyr, she had still believed she was doing the right thing. The 7 incidents, colloquially known as the New Generation Madness, Sua and Hazuki had caused them together. Partway through the incidents, Sua had grown quite flustered with his senior, Bon Yusuji, pointing out all the inconsistencies in the group dive video. The video Sua had uploaded to YouTube had been recorded by projecting his memories. However, as it had been a few days since the incident at the time of the recording, his memories had grown far less clear. He had not remembered the exact details of the scene, but since the video would not have been realistic without them, he had expressly gone to Cornelius' tower to review the photos hanging in the lobby. As a result, the video had indeed been made more realistic, but he had failed to choose the correct picture. He had no reason to suspect that something would look so strikingly different between the tower's completion and the present. However, thanks to the political influence of the glorious founder, all that had been suppressed. It would be unwise to underestimate the power of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light's glorious founder. He had many connections within the government, and he had even managed to weave several of his followers into management positions at the Metropolitan Police. I guess that does make sense as to how thorough the cover-up has been. Because now that you mention it, it wasn't like as though the only opposition that Bon was receiving was coming strictly from Sua. He was taken off in the investigation altogether by his superiors. So it wasn't just Sua, basically. The whole Metropolitan Police Force was compromised. Or rather, the leadership was. No matter how much those like Bond cried out for justice, the natural conclusion to come to was that they would never be able to do a thing to harm him. Sua's position as a detective, Hazuki's position as a nurse, the support coming from the pressure the Glory's founder placed on the police and the media, the NOAA system terminals provided by Nozomi Technology. Utilizing all these tools, Sua and Hazuki had focused solely on killing. As for the reason they had gone to such lengths to continue killing people, it had all been for the sake of breaking Nishijo Takumi. After they forced him to awaken as a gigalomaniac, they would kidnap him and harvest his code sample. Alternately, by breaking the delusionary Nishijo Takumi, they would lure out the real Nishijo Takumi, capture him, and harvest his code sample. As long as it was Nishijo Takumi, it made no difference if he was real or a copy. That was why Sua had acted as Nishijo Takumi, using a wheelchair in his impersonation attempt. It had all been foretold by a divine prophecy bestowed upon Sua and Hazuki, one they had to fulfill no matter what sacrifices they would have had to make during its course. And now, after sacrificing Hazuki, they had at least been able to overcome the trials given to them by God. The face of the woman who had loved him, and the one whom he had loved in return, rose in Sua's mind. He gritted his teeth in intense sadness, bearing the utmost grief. As he bathed in sorrow, Sua approached Nishijo Takumi, whose mind he had just slaughtered. At the edge of the platform, Aoi Sena cradled the head of her father, whom she herself had decapitated. She had fallen to her knees long ago, and now she sat alone atop the train tracks. Her chest dyed a deep crimson from her father's blood. She laughed. Drolls slovenly seeped out from her mouth. Her eyes were unfocused. Sua, now having composed himself, glanced at the girl. "She's already long gone," she muttered to himself inside his head. In any case, her usefulness had expired, and he felt no need to kill her. From the gigalomaniacs who had been gathered in Tokyo for Project Noah, there were still two whose code samples had yet to be harvested. This number excluded Kusunoki Yua, for she was an irregularity and had never been suspected of being a gigalomaniac. The remaining targets were Nishijo Takumi and Orihara Kozue. It had to be the infallible guidance of the divine light that the two of them had fallen right into Sua's hands. In the same location, even. He had now received total proof that his actions had always been proper and just. You keep telling yourself that. For this, he held hot, endless gratitude toward heaven and the glorious founder. Upon reaching Takumi, he dropped to his knees, grabbed the limp boy's upper arms, and attempted to forcefully pull him to his feet. But Takumi had already gone hollow. He was no longer capable of standing. His heart and mind had perished completely. Serves him right. With a snort, Sua began to walk away, dragging Takumi by the arms along with him. What's going on? Kosupi was shouting something. Sounded painful. Like she was hurting. Maybe having fun. I blinked my eyes. Where's Kosupi? She was hanging from some weird cross art. Rimi was at her feet. She was lying on the ground, tied up round and round. Cosby was weird. Her clothes were torn a lot. They were in pieces. And there was creepy crawling. Creepy crawling? What was? Her shell. Her skin. Her cheeks and her neck and her arms and around her belly button and up her thighs and creepy crawly. Squishy wishy. Lots of thingies were wriggling under Cosby's skin. Not 1, 10 thingies, 20 thingies, maybe 30 thingies. I think they're parasites. Yucky little caterpillars. Cosby shaky shakes her head around. Her eyes went everywhere. Lots of drool, dribbly drips dribble. Her face looked super stupid. Looked funny. And she was also wearing a thingy on her head. It had lots of cords coming out of it. Like a toy. Like a super duper Power Rangers toy set or something.
楽しいことでもあったのですか、西条匠。
An old guy I'd never seen before. Who? Who? Who?
なるほど。無意識に折原梢と妄想をシンクロさせているのですか。随分と物好きですね。そんなに焦らずとも、彼女の次は君にたっぷりとあの拷問を受けさせてあげますよ。
Who's next? Me? I didn't want that. Who's next? Me? No, I didn't want that. Who's next? Me? No, I didn't want that. I didn't want any suffering. I didn't want any pain.
タク、あなたなら止められる。今なら止められる。あなたなら。
My brain has been figuratively scrambled. I'm not sure he's in much of a position to do anything right now, Remy. My wrists should have been tied behind my back, but suddenly, as if it had a will of its own, the cord loosened and fell to the floor. Tied up and lying on the ground, Remy turned her gaze to me. Her eyes pleaded with me. A gigantic device sat in the center of the dome-shaped room, giving off an eerie hum. That is Noah 2. Destroy it. Remy's eyes asked this of me. A tall, intellectual-looking man, Neose, had his back turned to me, and he was watching Kosubi's torture with an earnest look on his face. He had noticed me moving. There was no one else around. Not even Suwa. I could do it now. I was the only one who could. But I was scared. What if Neose caught me? What if I failed? When I thought these things, my body began to tremble. There was something seriously wrong with this game, forcing the fate of the world onto someone like me. But I had to do it. That realization and resolve came to me with surprising ease. Maybe I'd grown stronger. Yeah, that was it. I was strong. I was super strong now. I stood up. Slowly. Neose still hadn't noticed. For a final boss, he was a total dumbass. Was it that fun watching Kosubi suffering? Raw disgust flowed through me. I gritted my teeth. Come forth, D-Sword. Ripples appeared in the open air, and a blue light burst forth. I grasped it. I felt it. Neither cold nor hot, neither hard nor soft. I drew it from the Dirac Sea, and a long, grand sword settled in my hand.
NANI?
He finally noticed me, but it was too late. I reel-booted my D-sword. I sent particles flying to everyone's dead spots. I'd done it completely unconsciously. The method that I'd used, or how it worked, didn't matter to me. I just had a delusion, and it had come to be. I gripped the hilt of my D-sword with both hands. Its glow transformed from blue to red.
心殺されたはず。
Nemose stared at me in disbelief. He was shrinking back. I'd won. I grinned from ear to ear, raised my sword, and formed a delusion. This was a sword of light. It possessed incredible power to cut through the very air itself. If I called forth all of its power and swung the blade, it could reduce anything on this earth to rubble.
くらえこれが
There is no fucking way it's gonna be this easy. No way. I couldn't come up with a name for my special attack right on the spot, so I just gave up on shouting something out. Besides, this wasn't some shonen manga.
あ
I took the power I'd stored in my D-sword through my delusions, and unleashed it all toward Noah 2. Okay, so did this actually happen, or what? 2 months later. The winter sky was barely blue. But in exchange, unlike the summer sky, it was crisp, cool, and carried an almost translucent aura. It was morning. A few minutes ago, my eyes had opened to the sound of my alarm clock. And now, as I brushed my teeth, my gaze shifted up toward the sky. It had been 2 months since that insanity. Shibuya was still in the midst of its reconstruction efforts. Ever since the new year had first kicked off, little by little, Shibuya had slowly been returning to its noisy, gaudy-ass self. A voice called my name. When I turned around, I saw Rimi making her way up the stairs. I hadn't seen her in a school uniform since that day. There is no way this is actually happening. There is no fucking way. Because so far up until this point, this felt like an even worse ending than the first one I just got. There is no way this is actually real. Rimi gave me a big smile and took a salute-like pose.
ビシおはよう朝ごはん急いで作るね
Rimi was holding a bag from the convenience store. Inside were some eggs, milk, and white bread. Standing in front of the sink, she cheerfully started making preparations. For the past 2 months, Rimi had made a point to come to my base pretty much every morning to cook me breakfast. Apparently she hadn't done much cooking before she'd met me, so this doubled as practice for her. I wanted to tell her not to use me as her guinea pig, but just being able to eat a girl's home cooking at all made me incredibly happy, so I just bit my tongue and put up with it.
今日から学校再開だね
You know, Nanami could have cooked you something if you'd stop being such a little bitch and let her. You bitch. Ever since the earthquake, Sume Academy had been closed down, but it was finally reopening today. I planned to use this opportunity to leave behind my semi-shut-in lifestyle, starting by seriously attending school.
タクトまた学校に通えるなんて嬉しいな。
As she said that, Remy cracked open an egg. As one would expect, it wasn't exactly feasible to eat outside right in the middle of winter. You'd freeze your ass off. To avoid that, Remy carried inside the 2 servings of toast and scrambled eggs she'd made for us, and set them down on a small table beside each other. And once our hands were free, the 2 of us sat down next to each other on the sofa.
じゃあ、いただきます。
いただきます。
After putting my hands together, I reached for the butter sitting at the edge of the table. However, Remy had done the same thing at almost the same time, and our fingertips brushed up against each other atop the container of butter. What a rom-com-ass plot point. Smiling wryly at that in my head, my eyes soon met with those of Remy's, who was sitting extremely close to me, and my heart began to pound. Remy didn't take her eyes off of me, nor did she pull her hand. Both of us had gone rigid, staring at each other as our fingers touched.
タク。
Remy entwined her fingers with my own. Nice duck face. Her eyes softly closed, and then she ever so slightly lifted her face. Naturally, I held Remy's hand in return. I slowly neared her lips.
朝から何イチャついてんの？
Well, speaking of the little one herself, hi, Nanami.
あ
Flustered, I jumped away from Remy. When I looked at my door, I saw Nanami standing there. I had no idea when she'd shown up. All I knew was that her arms were crossed and she had a pretty exasperated look on her face. You know, even though I strongly suspect none of this is actually happening, I won't lie, this is still amusing to see all the same. And I just wish it actually was happening. Nanami would be the absolute perfect mood killer for a scenario such as this.
ナナちゃん、おはよう。
ナナミ、心臓に悪いことするなよ。
Like you'd be that soft-toned with her over someone like this.
お兄とリミさんってほんと仲いいね。焼けちゃうな。ねえねえ、実際のところどこまで行ったの？
Why do you want to know?
どこまでって？またとぼけてないで教えてよ、リミさん。
I repeat, why do you want to know? Seems like Nanami has selected Remy as her next target. Barging into my room, she pulled aside my computer chair and sat down in front of Remy.
キスは当然したとして、その先は？ちょっとからかわないでよ。いいじゃん、教えて。教えない。じゃあ鬼、教えてよ、どこまで行ったか。
Not telling. Not telling you. Besides, we haven't even kissed yet. Why did you have to remind me? God, I'm such an idiot. I've had so many chances before now. I hate myself. At this rate, I feel like I'd never lose my V card. Starting to get depressed at how much of a loser I was, I gulped down some milk.
リミさんがのんびりしてるなら、ナナが鬼を奪っちゃうかな。
Now that sounded a bit incestuous, Nanami. Practically a gallon of milk spurted from my mouth.
おに汚な。
お前
Look what you made him do, Nanami. You made him spurt white stuff all over the place.
冗談だよ。本気にされても困っちゃうってば。
Phew. Could we please stop trying to give me a heart attack? Is that what you call it? Side by side, the three of us walked to school together. Rimi was humming that Phantasm song again. Passing through the center of Shoto Park, we took my usual shortcut. You could still see a few traces of the earthquake around the park. For example, part of the stone wall circling the pond was still broken. Even then, though, it was still way better off than the rest of Shibuya, especially when compared to the sad state of the center of it.
おはようございます。
Yua was sitting on the bench. Turning toward us, she put on a gentle smile and bowed her head.
西条くん、昨日はとても楽しかったです。
So you two made peace in this false world of yours, huh?
昨日？
ユアと一緒に秋葉原まで買い物に行ったんだ。
あ、わかった。お人形さんでしょう。
They're not dolls, they're action figures!
フィギュアと言えよ。
Well, it was true that we'd gone to buy figures.
新しいセイラちゃん。早速部屋に飾りました。私も行きたかったな。
リミってフィギュアに興味あるの？
When I asked that, Rimi gave a slightly sheepish smile.
っていうか、タクの好きなもの、私も好きになりたいし。わあ、大胆発言。だったら今度一緒に買いに行きましょう。え、本当？ありがとうございます。
Yua and Rimi had really hit it off. Yua and Nanami's classes were both in different buildings, so we said our goodbyes at the school entrance. As I changed into my indoor shoes, someone came up from behind me and blew into my ear. I shrugged, goosebumps springing up all over me, jumped away and spun around. There stood Ayase, wearing a narrow smile. How dare you blow me in the school hallway without permission? How indecent.
おはよう、タクミ。
あ、おはよ
おはよう、あやちゃん。あやちゃん。
Ayase tilted her head when she heard Rimi call her that.
初めてよ。そんな呼び方をされたのは悪くないわ。でしょ？ファンタズムのライブがあるの。あさって。
Over Morrow? There's a word I never heard before. She abruptly changed the subject. Unsurprisingly, Ayase was as hard to read as on as ever.
よかったら来て。
う。僕に言ってるの？
匠に言ってるのよ。それとリミも。あ、本当？絶対行くね。
Phantasm had broken up a while back, but I heard they had a sudden revival after the new year started up. I didn't know where the change of heart had come from, but what I did know was that I wanted to hear more of Ayase's singing.
でも匠は渡さないわ。
I really didn't know what was up with the butt, but Ayase reached out and softly caressed my cheek, as if she was showing Rimi in her place. Wait, is this some kind of harem ending I'm on or something?
じゃあね、匠。
I'm hanging out with... Rimi comes to make me breakfast. Tried to kiss me. Nanami flat shows up and flat out expresses jealousy. I apparently apparently went shopping with you yesterday to get some figures. And now this just happened with Ayase. Now I know for absolute certain that none of this is actually happening. Takumi is too much of a loser to get an actual harem. With a bewitching smile, she climbed the stairs in front of us. In a daze, I watched her go without the faintest clue what just happened.
たく、鼻の下伸びてる。
I quickly shot a hand up to my mouth. Well, I guess the only one we have left to confirm about when it comes to the possibility of this being a harem ending is Orihara. Where is the little psycho?
冗談。
When we reached the outside of her classroom,
たくみさん。
there she is. Kosubi came racing down the hallway, her smile stretching from ear to ear. And she tripped, didn't she? But before she could make it to us, she suddenly crashed into a boy coming out of the classroom and landed flat on her butt. Yep. Her eyes swimming with tears, she apologized to the boy, and finally managed to get over to us.
おはようさんさんなの。
Your Fanny okay, Orihara?
怪我はない？廊下を走っちゃダメだよ、コスピ。ほにゃ。
Kosubi started fidgeting. She then looked up at me from below.
たくみさんに早く教えたかったのら。
And what might that be?
教えるって何を？
ほんとね。
That's not telling me something, that's showing me something. Kosubi pointed in a direction she had just come running from. Oh, Seina, I can't believe I forgot about you. When I looked closer, I saw Seina standing there, leaning against the wall. Her arms were crossed, and she had a fairly sullen expression plastered on her face.
セナさん、退院したんだ。
Oh, what was she in the hospital for? Seina had been hospitalized over the past 2 months. Suicide psychological attack had put her out of commission for a long time. Should have guessed. Seina raised her head, then slowly began making her way toward us. She was just as scary as ever. She always carried a certain aura, one that gave off the impression that she would suddenly slap you even if you hadn't done anything wrong. Spoken like a person in an abusive relationship. I had gone to visit Seina in the hospital twice a week, but no matter how many times I'd tried to make conversation, she never said so much as a single word. The awkwardness had been torture. Not as much torture as what Sua put us through. Could it be that she just hated me that much? I didn't really know how to handle her. Nah, I bet she's just acting soon with you. A fierce tension hung in the air between us. Then again, it would have been far more accurate to say that I was only freaked. Only I was freaked out. She was fine.
というわけで、今日は学校が終わったら退院のお祝いをしよう。
Kosubi was the only one showing any sort of enthusiasm. Well, I mean, a party with this kind of atmosphere would be pretty shitty. Speak for yourself.
西条。
That was when Seina finally opened her mouth. I shrank back, refusing to meet her eyes.
これを。
Seina held something out to me. It was a small stick with the word win written on it. She's even giving me a winning lottery stick. Yep, she's part of the harem too, it seems. Accompanied with a blushing face too. Bewildered, I accepted it. Sana quickly looked the other way. So, how many of these popsicles did you have to eat before finding this stick? For me, I wonder.
お前に言いたいことがある。
なんでしょう。
Was it just my imagination, or had Sana's cheeks turned pink?
お前のことが好きだ。
Well, number one, oh look, yet another new sprite for you I'd never seen before. And number two, well, I mean, dang. She's certainly bolder than all the other girls so far. She just comes right out and just says it.
Huh?
Her sudden confession left not just me, but Rimi and Kozupi all speechless. Oopie is not speechlessness, Takumi! For a moment, I thought she was just teasing me, but Sana wasn't the type of character to make those kinds of jokes. Which meant... Are you serious?
何度もお見舞いに来てくれて嬉しかったんだ。
Uh-huh.
言わせるな、このバカが。
She had just gone all dare, then went straight back to Soon mode all on her own. Wait, go back a little. This is all way too sudden. Way behind schedule, Rimi let out a cry in surprise. Kozupi, likely still processing, had her eyes open wide. Give Kozupi a minute, everybody. She's got like 30 tabs open.
なんだ、先ほど。異論があるのか。
張りまくりだよ。そんな、とにかくダメだって。
Now she's making funny mouth noises with question marks as subtitles. I don't know what alien tongue she's speaking, but I'm curious to learn it. Rimi and Kozupi were utterly baffled, but the most bewildered one of all was me. I would have never expected something so insane. Without any idea of how in the hell I was supposed to react, I gazed up at the clear sky sitting outside the window. Somehow, even though the semester had only just started, it was already quite the eventful day. Hey, game! This is supposed to be the crying sky ending, right? Where's the crying? Where's the water falling? Why aren't the clouds dark and gray and dreadful, like the contents of my head and heart? I wonder, will every day be like this from now on? Will these fun, peaceful times go on forever? I sure hope so. I wished for it from the bottom of my heart. Suddenly, I saw the reflection of my face in the window. And the reflection I saw wasn't me, because it was covered in wrinkles. Here it comes. Color and light disappeared. What's that little TV? I was hugging my knees close to me in a space dyed in pitch black. In front of my eyes was the only light source around. It was like a monitor. It was like a window. It was like a picture frame. Inside it, Rimi, Sana, Kozupi were chatting happily about something. but I couldn't hear their voices. I like that I can faintly make out the Japanese kanji in the subtitles. So clearly I'm still in that little thing. I'm looking at the OG Japanese translation. Well, then again, I guess it's not really a translation in this case, since it's from the country of origin in question, but you know what I mean. Inside it, Rimi, Sane, and Kosubi were chatting happily about something, but I couldn't hear their voices. I stared at it. My emotions were completely inactive, or maybe my heart was simply dead. I then realized I had been watching my own delusions. A 2D world where I had escaped into. A perfect illusion. How long had it all been a delusion?
最初からですよ。
I looked behind me, where Neosekken stood tall. With how dark it was, I could only see his feet.
諏訪君に心を殺されたではありませんか。
So, ever since he'd done that, I'd been in a delusion the entire time?
君のコードサンプルは採取できました。もう用済みですから、いつでも塵に帰ってもらって結構です。
ああ。
I felt nothing. My heart was dead after all, so I shouldn't have felt anything. And yet, a single tear trickled down my cheek. In the end, I'd gone right back to being a loser. I had run away from the painful reality.
最後に幸せな夢を見られてよかったですね。
Even to the very end, I have been a completely worthless human being. I'm sorry, Rimi. I apologized, but I didn't really understand why I had to anymore. I didn't feel any guilt. And so, I decided to return to my delusion from earlier. Hopefully, someone would kill me one of these days. So until then, I wanted to fully immerse myself in the happiness that came from the world I escaped to. When had the rain begun to fall? Or perhaps this rain had been brought into the world by Noah too. A gaze rained down from the sky. The stare pierced through the thick, pitch-black rain clouds and poured down on me like rain. It's too late for him now. I whispered in my heart to the owner of the gaze. I didn't feel the chill of the rain. Instead, the droplets on my cheeks felt warm to me. It was the first time I ever thought of rain as being warm. Perhaps it was the fault of the spine-chilling cold enveloping the dome where Neuro 2 was. Reflected in my eyes was a ruined city. Reflected in my eyes was despair. Reflected in my eyes was death. Reflected in my eyes was nothingness. Not a soul was here. Not a soul was moving. Not a soul was left alive. The only thing I could hear was the sound of the rain continuing to pour. The ark had already been set into motion. We had been unable to stop it, and now the future held nothing but despair. At this rate, everything, both the living and the dead, would it all be gently embraced and washed away? I heard him whisper all this inside his heart. His heart. It's so beautiful. I walked to the figure lying limp in the rubble. It was my fault he had ended up like this. Just from Rimi's perspective, if I had done better, he wouldn't have gotten involved at all. Feelings of guilt tortured me. I blamed myself. Forgive me. I'll give you peace now. How had he been born was far too sad. How he was going to die was far too sad. A heart so timid, so fragile. It was like it was made of glass. Glass so pure, it had shattered its owner to pieces. At the very least, I didn't want him to suffer in the end. Lying on the ground, he looked up to me with vacant eyes. I pushed aside my emotions. Though I was looking at him, I tried to distance myself in an attempt to stave off my tears. If you and I were the only ones left in the world, if we stared into each other's eyes like this for all eternity, would my world be reduced to what's reflected in your eyes? Would your world be reduced to what's reflected in my eyes? The only thing reflected in my eyes was him. The only thing reflected in his eyes was me. When I thought of it that way, the world immediately seemed so much smaller. At least in the time you have left, I will become your world. Whether the world is painful, whether the world is agonizing, or whether the world is sorrowful, I'll make it so you no longer have to see it anymore. Gathering my resolve, I let out a whisper. Lowering my head, I spread my arms wide, almost as if I was preparing to take off, to soar above the rain clouds, as if I was trying to catch all the falling rain.
あなたを見つめる妄想。殺してあげる。
Feathers of light danced about. They served as a gift handed down from the sky, a gift for his funeral. I slowly knelt to the ground, right before his collapsed body. I'll cry if I see your eyes. I'm sorry. I can't look at them. I softly embraced his head in my arms. His body was devoid of all strength, as if he was fully prepared for death.
辛いよね。ごめん。ごめんね。今、楽にしてあげるからね。
His demeanor told me that I wasn't just doing this for my own sake. He has a very peaceful smile on his face. But that smile was so sad. Even though I held it in all this time, tears began to well up. I'd held them back because I didn't ever want him to see those tears. He'd finally found peace. And I didn't want to worry him any further. I kissed him on the lips. They were cold, desiccated, and laden with seemingly endless sorrow. And yet, when I kissed him, his trembling ceased. I was overjoyed to know that my warmth was of some use to him. If I drew back from his lips, he would see my teary face. If I drew back from his lips, I would want to kiss him again. If I drew back from his lips, I would be struck with such selfish feelings, I wouldn't be able to kill him anymore. My lips still enveloping his, I sank my D-sword into his chest. The sensation of it tearing through his skin and boring into his flesh, weaving through his bones, and slowly sinking through to the center of his body. It all passed through the sword and into my hands. I'm so sorry. You can sleep for as long as you want to now. Goodbye. Was the sky blurring because of the rain? Because of my tears? His body was enveloped by countless particles of light, and he slowly began to disappear. I reached my hand toward the sky. Somebody, please tell me, just where could that sky of ours have gone? Now that definitely sucked. Basically, it's just like the last ending, only not only is Takemi's death completely 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt confirmed, we completely failed to even stop the big bad himself from enacting his big plan. So, pretty much is about as bad an ending as we can really get, given the circumstances. And what makes it even better or worse, depending on how you want to look at it, is as the little guide I've been consulting up until now has basically shown me, you have to go out of your way to fail this hard. Like, this isn't something that even on repeat playthroughs you're likely to stumble across on accident. You would have to either try repeatedly over and over and over again until eventually you get to stick, or or like me, you would deliberately have to look up information on how to achieve this ending in order to get it. Indeed, I have truly earned this failure. Well, there it is. Two endings, and I've already been playing this for 64 hours already. And apparently I've achieved 100% of whose eyes are those eyes. Whatever that is. Well, now I've got to decide which story route I want to try to go with next, I guess. Now I've got this particularly troublesome ending out of the way. We've got 7 more to go through, including what will be the true ending. I guess I'll just choose one of the heroine routes, but as to which one I'll do first, yeah, I'll think about it for a while. I'll likely have a solid decision made by the time we get to the next episode. So until then, I guess I'll go ahead and end things here. Well, getting to experience the new gen murders from the perspective of the victims was fun as hell. Not gonna lie. I'm being sarcastic, of course. Hopefully I won't have to deal with something similar again. Then again, considering that I still have 7 more different story routes to sit through, I guess it is certainly possible that even more similar unpleasantness it might end up coming my way. And maybe it'll blow everything else that I've seen so far out of the water in regards to the sheer squick factor. Again, I think whoever wrote this thing wrote these scenes specifically just to torture people like me. And if that's their goal, they succeeded. All right, enough rambling. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of Chaos Head Noah. If you did and you'd like to see more content from me, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you all next time for the beginning of whatever story route I decide to go through next. Take care.